What's going on, everyone? Zane here with Everything Vive. So excited to bring you today's episode, which is an interview with Logan Olson. And he is the creator of Soundstage, the developer behind it. I do want to apologize ahead of time. Unfortunately, Ronnie could not make it for the interview today, so it's just me. I'm flying solo, and Logan and I get into it. And I mean, it's super impressive what he's done. If you haven't had a chance to check out Soundstage yet, I highly recommend it. Musician or not, it's just a really cool application, and VR makes it that much better. So I will not let this intro drag on any longer. And yeah, here we go. Hey guys, want to welcome you all to a very exclusive interview here with Logan Olson. Is that how you say your last name?
It is.
All right, Logan, the developer behind Soundstage. We are very lucky to have him here. Wanted to get some insight and some background, get to know more about what Soundstage is. And yeah, Logan, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. We're really excited about it. So I had the chance to get Soundstage as soon as I got my Vive, which is about, I want to say, a month ago at this point. And I was totally blown away. Ronnie is the one who turned me on to it because I'm a musician. I produce music in my spare time. And so I was just totally blown away. Like I said, the depth and everything behind it, and let me, just to preface it for people who may not be familiar with Soundstage, you can get it on Steam, and straight off the Steam webpage, it says the virtual reality music sandbox built specifically for room scale VR. And I think that captures it pretty perfectly, in my opinion. So Logan, I mean, do you want to give us, I'd love to hear just some inspiration for Soundstage. What is the story behind it, and how did it come about?
Yeah, sure, man. So I'm actually not a musician. The last time I played with music, though, was analog synthesizers back in college. And do you ever play with synthesizers?
Yes, I've dabbled here and there. I need to dig in just a little bit. Sorry for interrupting, but you're not a musician, and you built probably one of the coolest VR music applications. You got to tell me more about that.
Man. Yeah, no. So I am by no means. I've never made a song. I mean, like a lot of kids. I had piano lessons and guitar, and I played guitar when I was much younger. I guess when you're a kid, you're doing piano, guitar. I don't know if you remember like Tracker software, which is probably still around, where you'd like plug in your samples almost like on a piano roll. So I guess I'd play with that and analog synthesizers in college. And then probably my biggest inspiration is Maximus P, or Pure Data, if you're familiar with that. Are you familiar with Maximus P?
No, I don't believe so. Okay. I'll have to look into that. But give me the
so it's like so Maximus P is kind of the first one. Pure Data is essentially an open source one. So if you want to play with it, go ahead and look up Pure Data. And it's essentially like a DSP for artist visual programming language. And I did a lot of interactive installations and a lot of digital prototyping. And whenever I needed to modify video or audio, I'd use either Maximus P if I could afford it, or Pure Data if I couldn't. And it was a way to do a lot of like crazy audio synthesis along with video synthesis. So I'd take like old Arduinos, if you're familiar with Arduinos, which is kind of like hacker hardware for less technically inclined people who want to do physical interactions, like turning on LEDs or pressing buttons or motors and that sort of thing. It's been around for quite a while now. But I'd like hook up Arduinos to video screens, so like, when you hit somebody, it would modify the video on the screens, or like as I'd build a tunnel, and as you crawl through the tunnel, it would change the visuals and like increase the noise levels, or maybe have like a low frequency oscillator changing like the wob. So I used to do a lot of installations like that many moons ago back in college, and that's kind of how I got familiar with digital signal processing and audio design, and all these sort of tools that essentially are getting their cues from audio software originally. And so when I got a Vive, and I used to do VR like 10 years ago. We can talk about that if you want. But when I got a Vive recently, I thought one thing that would be super rad is doing one of those old school room scale analog synthesizers. So like if you go look at like the 1970s and 1960s synthesizers, they weren't like on an iPad, and it wasn't like Reason or anything like that. That's just built on your monitor, but it'd be like these giant crazy walls of wires hooked up to keyboards with all these dials and buttons. Essentially looked like the cockpit from Alien, but with like a dude with long hair going crazy inside of it. And
that's a great way to put it.
And now, when you look at that stuff, it's just an iPad, and it's really incredible that an iPad can do that. But I think you're losing a lot of the physicality, and it's hilarious that right around when I released Soundstage, they released a $30 Moog synthesizer that is incredibly accurate and loyal to the Moog, and has that really great sound and has all those capabilities. But when you watch this demo video, this dude's trying to navigate it on like a pane of glass, right? And so you see him like grab a chord with one finger and then start scrolling with the other finger to travel over to where he wants to plug in the chord. And it's just like, man, that's not the right user interface for this sort of paradigm. And it seemed like that's something that VR could do quite well. So I started building that. And when I started showing it to friends, even friends who are musically inclined, it was kind of like, that's all right, man. But what I really want is, all those great physical instruments like drums and keyboards and all that good stuff. So I was like, all right, well, let's expand our scope a little bit beyond just modular synthesis. And, once you do that, people are like, well, now I really want a sequencer so I can compose in real time. And, and then I want samples. And so it slowly snowballed into this more feature-rich product, and is still, I'd argue, not even feature complete for most people who want to do music, right? So there's still quite a bit that needs to be added until you have something that a musician feels is capable enough. So that's kind of where it came from.
I mean, you know what? The thing, hearing the story behind it now, it's pretty awesome, man. I gotta say, I mean, yeah, of course, at the end of the day, you're gonna have much more powerful computing or apps that will be able to accomplish, they'll be able to accomplish much different things. But what you said in terms of the room scale, that's, I think, my favorite part about it, is just being able to have the physicality and not having to scroll through. Yeah, I mean, it's fantastic. I'm not trying to downplay that you can do a lot of this stuff on iPhones or iPads even, but, just being able to, there's something about being in the room and being like creating like your own virtual studio around you, where, I love the little, I don't even know what to call it, the little menu that pops up, and then you can just place it anywhere. And so you're rearranging your studio as you go and just building on it. And I think that's incredible. So it's really cool to see how that developed for you, because it sounds like it started as just a small idea or something like with the synthesizers you were saying, right?
Well, it's essentially, for those folks who aren't familiar with Soundstage, there's a bunch of different instruments or modules, and you essentially spawn them and place them where you want and can scale them up or down. And then you connect them with chords to create essentially chains that form audio, right? So you might take a very simple sound and then run that through a keyboard to change the pitch of it so you get high and low notes, and then run that through a filter. Filters come in the next update so that you can shape the sound a little bit. And that's essentially like a DSP chain, a digital signal processing chain. But yeah, so there's all those different instruments. When it started out, like, it was essentially just the oscillator. And again, for folks who aren't familiar with audio, an oscillator is just something that generates a wave. And if a wave goes fast enough, you can hear it. So that was like the core of Soundstage, was just chaining oscillators together to create crazy synthesizer sounds. But again, it turns out that I'm in the minority on them thinking that's enough for a product. So it expanded from there.
Well, I mean, I'm glad to see where it is now. And I guess this kind of segues into something else I was planning to discuss a little bit later, but you kind of mentioned a future update. I'm just curious what's coming in down the pipeline, or what are you trying to do next with Soundstage to take it to the next level?
So, like, I kind of alluded to it earlier, but there's definitely a sort of version 1.0 set of features that need to be in there for someone to make something that sounds rad. And so, and different folks are pretty vocal about what they want to see in there. So in the next update, which hopefully, as of this interview, is hopefully coming out next week, this week. So I don't know when this interview drops, but hopefully over the next few days, there's an update that should have filters, improved mixers for those who want to like crossfade between sounds. And then there's a whole series of different effects that folks want. Everybody wants echo and EQing so they can shape the sound a little bit. And then I think we got to get into recording and making recording better for folks who actually want to capture their performance. So those are kind of like the two core things coming down the pipe. And then also the question of shareability, and then just performance improvement. Like there's still a little bit of delay on the drums I'm trying to get rid of. And then for audio folks, they really want to use the VSTs, the virtual sound instruments from other programs. So still looking into that. And again, for hardcore audio people, plus the toy audience, MIDI so that they can control their actual sound programs with Soundstage. And Soundstage's core strength isn't generating really beautiful sounds or having a really powerful sound engine. The core of Soundstage is just the interface, right? So if you can change that interface to a program that can generate really, warm, awesome simulations of sounds from the 70s or 80s, it's like, God bless you, use that, and just use Soundstage for the visuals and doing the input. And then for more casual users, trying to help users get into it. Because right now, for folks who use Soundstage, especially if you're not a musician, it takes like a good 5 to 10 minutes to figure out what the heck is going on. So trying to smooth out that learning curve so anybody can jump in there and have a good time.
Yeah, true. I mean, well, there's a lot in there, and I don't say that as a bad thing. I mean, it has a lot of functionality, which I think is there's so much to explore, so much to dive into. So just going back to what you were saying earlier about, so you're trying to put in third-party like VST plugins and have integration with that?
We're looking into it. So for folks who want this to go faster, I'm finally looking into and getting contractors. And so we're having a contractor look at VST to see just how feasible or difficult it would be in a very like official manner, as opposed to just like me surfing Wikipedia.
Well, I mean, as a music producer myself, I can say that would be pretty cool if you found a way to integrate it. I feel like it would take a lot of computing power, but at the same time, I think I would add a lot of customizability for people who've become like very comfortable with certain VST plugins.
Yeah. So TBD, man. We'll see what the dude says when he comes back.
Awesome. Okay. Well, let's hope there's some good news on that in the future. Just curious though, what is the if I may ask, what is the big picture or long-term strategy for Soundstage? Like where would you like to get it? I'm not talking about tomorrow, next week, or even next month, but I know this kind of started out as just maybe a side thing for you, or you were just showing it to friends, but sitting here now, where would you like it to go? I mean, the first thought that comes to my mind, and I don't want to put the words in your mouth, but the first thought that comes to my mind is maybe just having a whole virtual studio, which would be pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the not obvious is the wrong word, but sort of the vector it's on right now is slowly progressing to a DAW, like a digital audio workstation. Obviously, there's a lot of functionality built into that and expected from one of those. So essentially, I think we got an evolution to go from right now where it's in this kind of awkward, not quite a easily usable toy, not quite a robust piece of performance software, and hopefully grow it into both of those. Like I don't want to leave behind folks who just want to have a good time, and I understand that probably the core audience moving forward will more and more be musicians who want to use VR. And so if I can continue to walk that line and fill out the feature set so it appeals to both those users, but essentially GarageBand, right? I think that's the next step or the forward-looking trajectory of Soundstage.
That would be very cool. I mean, I started producing music maybe I want to say 6 to 7 years ago, and I was learning all the new stuff. But I've taken classes with some of the guys who've been around since like the 70s and 80s, and they're all about the analog gear. And they always talk about, oh, I can't believe it's so easy for you guys nowadays, blah, this, blah, that. And so I feel like one guy in particular, I'm trying to get him to come over at some point just to try out Soundstage. But if you had a whole studio in there, I think he'd get a total kick out of being able to recreate his experiences from back in the day. That'd just be a lot of fun, I think, for some people who've been in it for a while longer.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. I think there's there's only so much you're going to be able to do with the current set of hardware. I would flag though, like it's interesting when I've put older musicians in it. There's always a novelty factor with VR, right? And we'll continue to have that novelty factor for a while. But when it starts turning into an actual tool, specifically musicians, there's a lot of expectations about using your fingers. And currently, you have what's essentially what in literature is called a boxing glove interface, right? You essentially have a boxing glove with a few buttons on it. And you're going to limit who your audience is from a musician standpoint, as long as that's the core way you interact with your world. And there's definitely ways you can circumvent that. Like, right, like if there's MIDI, there's no reason you have to use the virtual keyboard. You could always have a physical keyboard with only the effects being done using the Vive controllers. So there's definitely ways around it. But I think that's going to, as the software progresses and becomes more robust, that will definitely hold it back in the same way that, say, a touchscreen holds back the iPad. And obviously you see, again, the same sort of ways to circumvent it, right? You see people plugging in large like DJ boards and keyboards into their iPad. So the iPad is more just a display and a piece of compute. But I think that would be giving VR the short end of the stick. Like there seems to be a way to get those two together. And, the dream version of this is augmented reality. So it just becomes a question of like, when and how are we going to accomplish that, and making sure that you can, as a developer, stay flexible as those new technologies are coming down the pipe.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, I know there's been a lot of talk about the Oculus Touch controllers coming out and the new Vive ones that are currently in development. I don't think they're going to be there yet in terms of the types of dexterity that you'd have with, your own human fingers and hands. But it's definitely getting there, and it'd be exciting to see, where that goes and how, applications like yours will be able to take advantage of that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I want to, if you don't mind, get away from Soundstage for a little bit and just talk VR in general. Now, it sounded like you said earlier you've been developing VR for a while, so I'm just curious how long that's been and what got you into it.
I started almost 10 years ago now. So I started doing VR stuff in 2007 or 2008, around there. And it was actually originally to just pay my way through grad school. So people who are into VR are probably familiar with Institute for Creative Technologies. And if you're not, it's where Palmer Luckey kind of like got his start and learned about VR before springboarding into Oculus. And we share the same mentor, Mark Bolus, who just got picked up by HoloLens. So that's where I got my start. And what's funny is like when I was there, man, I didn't think VR was going anywhere. I was like, what's really going to be big is giant touchscreen tables. But they're like, that's all well and good, Logan. But we actually need you to keep working on the VR stuff. So I was like, all right. So back then it was the Wide 5 was like the cutting edge VR display. It was a wide field of view display. I think it was like 800 by 600 resolution, and had like two or four giant DVI cables connecting it, and you couldn't really see what was going on the headset, so you just kind of had to pray it was working. And our motion tracking software was a company that's still around called FaceSpace, and now they do like professional like movie tracking and that sort of thing. But FaceSpace, so that was like it's funny, like the equipment I have now, like a Vive, it's $800, but back then that was like, tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, to achieve the same level of functionality. But yeah, so that's how I got my start. And, back then Unity was just for Mac. So we used a program called Panda 3D, which is what Carnegie Mellon and the ETC use, if anybody goes to school there for video games, or used to use. And then also powered a lot of the attractions at Disney theme parks. So learned Panda 3D so that we could do Python-driven VR stuff. And then as Unity came on board, we hopped over to that. And that's how I got my start. Back then we were doing like, you can find stuff that I used to do, like a few clips of the VR from back then, but a lot of like urban planning stuff, like placing buildings or commanding like UAV things, or redirected walking experiments, if you're familiar with redirected walking. So yeah, that's how I got my start in VR a long time ago. And then I left for a while to go do theme parks and toys. And then I kind of, picked it back up again with this Vive explosion.
Well, I'm glad you didn't place all your bets on the the big touchscreen tables.
They'll come back. Just you wait.
I'm waiting for the day. All right, cool. It sounds like you've been immersed in this for quite a while, which is awesome. And I mean, 2016 seems like it's been a big year for VR in general. So, for you, has that been the same experience? For me, I come from it as more of an enthusiast, and so this is all relatively new to me. I'm still trying to wrap my head around everything that's happening. But I'm just curious, from your perspective as a developer, are the gates kind of wide open now? Are there plenty of opportunities? Like, what does it look like from your experience or from your perspective?
Well, there's definitely it's funny because anybody who's into VR development and hangs out with a lot of VR devs has a very different perception of this than the general public, and specifically and then you kind of have to divide that general public into people who are really interested in VR and then people who are actually buying VR, right? So where we're at right now is probably like at the peak excitement for VR, and this fall has been the first time that it can be delivered on through easily purchasable products, right? You got PSVR, Vive is no longer in short supply. Like if you want a Vive, you can get a Vive, and Oculus Touch is coming down the pipe here shortly as well. So between those three, like if you want VR, you can get VR. You no longer have to imagine what it's going to be like. And so I think to me, this has been the year of buildup of excitement. And I think this Christmas season or this holiday season and the spring of next year, we're going to see if that's delivered upon or not. So yeah, there's definitely a big boom, but I think it's kind of one of those we're kind of in the put up or shut up part, at least for this specific VR wave for consumers.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like that people have been saying VR has been coming for a while, but to me, I mean, the user or consumer experience is already here. From my perspective, it just seems like it's only going to continue to get better. I feel like the tipping point, if we haven't arrived there, it's pretty close to it becoming mainstream, especially with PSVR becoming widely available now.
Well, we'll see. I mean, that's essentially what this next push is, right? I think we'll know by next summer if this is a mainstream thing or a niche thing. And if it's a niche thing, that's not the end of the world. I think it just becomes not ready for consumers yet. So because it's interesting, it kind of blows my mind how much focus is being put on consumer-oriented VR, not professional VR, right? So if you think about smartphones or desktop computers or really just about any computer technology, it rarely leapfrogs companies and goes straight to consumers. It usually has to get into an office before it can get cheap enough to get into a home. And it's been fascinating to see that not be mentioned more vocally with VR. And maybe it is, and I'm just missing it. I mean, feel free to disagree with me, but it seems most of the talk has been entertainment focused, A, not enterprise focused, and B, focused on people at home having a good time with it, as opposed to people at work using it to be more productive or more effective. And that's been interesting. And it'll be interesting to see if consumers don't take to it this holiday season, if it gets pivoted over into enterprise, or if everybody just kind of abandoned ship. So yeah.
That's a great point. I had never really thought about it from that perspective. Just because now from a consumer standpoint, you see a lot of different applications that can be done with it. So, I mean, you're saying that you haven't seen much in the professional aspect, or you haven't seen much on the enterprise side?
I'd say when you think about press, right? Like if you follow a bunch of VR blogs or VR think pieces, it certainly gets mentioned. But I'd argue that for every one article about how VR will help an architecture firm or help somebody be more effective at project management, you have tens of articles about a really cool game experience, a really cool location-based entertainment or VR arcade. And that's maybe because entertainment's more fun to read about. But if that's kind of where all the developers are, I think you have a sort of glaring gap in the market, and it'll be interesting to see how that gap gets filled.
Oh, so it sounds like it's ripe with opportunity then. Cool. Okay. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. I got one more here for you, and this is more so, I guess, just a hypothetical. So, as a developer, what one wish do you have for the future of VR platforms? And I think more specifically in the talking points that I sent over, I gave the example, if you were the CEO of HTC or Oculus, where would you be focusing your company's time, energy, resources, etc.?
Well, I got two different answers for that, because the thing I'd want the most is probably not the something as a CEO I think is very feasible. But the thing that I think is a glaring absence right now is haptics or kinetic feedback. And so if there's one thing I'd absolutely want folks to be looking at, it would be haptic feedback, and not just like vibrations or light gusts of wind, but if I put my hand on a wall, how can I have that wall push back like a wall? So that would be my my number one pie in the sky. That being said, that's obviously very difficult to do. So I actually don't know. That seems almost like a Sisyphusian effort. So, I guess if I was you, I could still ask for that, but I wouldn't expect returns anytime soon, because then you're starting to talk about like Star Trek holodeck levels of feedback.
Yeah. Well, what's the other one then?
I don't know, man. That's my core answer. I mean, I'll say AR. You can say because VR is essentially a stepping stone to augmented reality. So you can talk about having better transparent displays, or displays that aren't just additive lighting, so you can include things, would be pretty huge. HoloLens is obviously amazing, minus the field of view and motion track peripherals. So always asking for those would be great. So it'd be putting more chips into augmented reality. But at the end of the day, that's going to come whether we want it or not. I think the real question is going to be, how are we going to deliver as well on our physical touch sense as well as we're delivering on our visual and auditory senses?
Yeah, well, I mean, the haptic feedback, like you said, I think that's going to be a huge one. If we can turn a corner at some point, that would be full immersion right there, because then there's nothing to let aside from maybe smell. I think that might be the smell and taste might be the last couple senses that aren't necessarily covered in VR, but that, having touch being fully recognized would be a huge stepping stone in the whole full immersion.
Mm-hmm. So we'll see, man. I don't know, like that's the holy grail, but give it some time. We'll see if somebody invents hard light.
Well, it's very exciting times to be involved in virtual reality, I'll tell you that. So, well, I wanna thank you for taking the time out and for just being here and allowing the listeners a look inside Soundstage and yourself. And so, is there a place or a way that people can connect with you? Yeah, man.
Just Google Soundstage VR and Soundstage VR on Twitter, Soundstage VR on Facebook, or just search for Soundstage on Steam. And please post a link to the Steam store wherever you post this, because obviously that's the key to keeping me going is reviews and checking out Soundstage.
Absolutely. No, there will be a link in the show notes, guys. So make sure you check it out. Firsthand experience for myself, I cannot recommend it. Whether you're a musician or whether you're just dabbling, it's so much fun. And it just takes me back to when I was a kid and I had no idea anything about music, but you had that those old dusty keyboards where you could just kind of set something up and play along to it. This is just on a virtual reality level. It's a lot of fun. Can't recommend it enough. So thank you again, Logan. Really appreciate the time.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. Have a good one.
Thanks. You too. Take care.
Bye.